in the system. So they welcome things like this because nobody campaigns in a given country saying, I'm going to steal less than the last guy, but I'm still going to steal. Who's going to campaign on that? They're campaigning on honesty and integrity and good values. And so there was a lot of receptivity from a number of countries. Bills are used by criminals more often than Bitcoin. But let's take Bitcoin off of the out of the equation here. I'm talking about decentralization of finance. I'm talking about Web3. I'm talking about blockchain. I'm talking about different concepts. These are concepts. You can take Bitcoin and put it over there. And little by little, I started gaining traction. But this is an institution where from the time a loan is originated to the time it reaches its end destination, you have like 150 nodes that like have to approve or disapprove. So it's a very big bureaucracy, and moving the bureaucracy is hard. That was the challenge.
I could imagine.
The other challenge was, I thought to myself, why are we doing a loan or a grant or whatever in a given sector? Why is this sector better than that sector? Why is sanitation better or worse than education? And the feedback I got was, it's all important. And I said, well, if we were to rack and stack and we were going to prioritize what's most important, what would it be? And everyone was like, well, whatever the country manager thinks it is. And so it was very subjective. Then I went back and I said, wait, the World Bank sits on, petabytes of data going back 40 years. What if we could apply machine learning to all of the loans that we've given out over the last 40 years? And then overlay that with, was it effective? Did school scores go up? Did infant mortality get reduced? Did literacy get improved? Whatever, right? And then you can, based on the data, based on objective hard science, you can determine, well, where should we deploy our money? And so that was another project. That was before AI became a thing. And this is in 2017, 2018. I'm trying to move the bank into the modern era. And again, I got a lot of support, but just turning the machine is hard. Turning the Queen Mary is very hard.
Yeah, I could imagine.
So.
Could imagine. What?
After half a mile,
I don't know
take
what to
the
ask
exit,
right now.
then
We can talk about China at the World Bank. It's my topic du jour. So I get there and I realize, wait, as I mentioned earlier, why is China getting all these loans from the World Bank? One of which was to an education project in Xinjiang. Remember I mentioned earlier that there were ethnic minorities that were not Han Chinese living in the far western hinterlands of China. So we did a project. The World Bank did a project there, and it turned out that the Chinese were using it for repression. And of course they covered it up, and when the press got wind of it, everybody went into damage control mode, because loans sometimes fall into the wrong hands and they're used for bad things. But I couldn't quite understand why China was getting all this money. Furthermore, I couldn't understand why China was winning all of these procurement contracts. So if the World Bank loans money to a country, a poor country, and they want to build a road, they do a tender, and in almost every case, China wins the tender because they're the cheapest bidder.
After 3/4 of a mile.
And so I thought, man, what are we winning? We being the U.S. I represent the U.S. and we're winning less than 1% of these billions and billions of dollars of contracts, and China's winning 40%. So I thought, wait, China is getting money from the World Bank, yet they're winning all these billions of dollars of contracts. Something's wrong here.
After half a mile,
and then
right.
At the same time, the Chinese government is competing with the World Bank and loaning money everywhere around the world, right? We call it predatory lending. And what happens is the loans seemingly don't come with strings to an African country or whatever, a South Asian country, but they do. When the country can't pay back the Chinese loan, China's like, I think I'll take that port. I'll take that facility. I want that mine. And so these countries were coming to the World Bank going, help us, help us. And so, wait, my taxpayer money is going to the World Bank so that the World Bank can help this country repay the Chinese loans?
Wow.
What?
And the World Bank's paying China.
And the World Bank's paying China, and the Chinese are winning all these procurement contracts. I thought, there's something wrong here. And so I did the very best I could to highlight a lot of these problems. But nobody in Washington really seemed to care, because the World Bank is, first of all, nobody knows what it is or what it does, but it's got real money, like $100 billion a year, 80 to 100 billion. That's real money.
Mm-hmm.
And it could be used very effectively for its real mission. And its real mission is to help poor people not be poor. And so
How can nobody in Washington care?
at the time,
How is that even possible? Does anybody do their job there?
look, I'm not going to throw anybody under the bus. I think there were and are a lot of well-intentioned people working in the U.S. government who didn't see this for the totality of what was going on. How did they win? And so you've got a lot of folks in Washington that are well-intentioned and very smart, but they don't see, at the time especially, they didn't really see what the big deal was.
They can't think outside of a box.
Yeah, and also China wasn't a thing back then. Nobody thought that China was going to be the malevolent adversary that it's become. I think now a lot of people's eyes have been opened, but back then, everyone just thought, well, China's just a big developing country. We got to help them with stuff like, climate change, and we have to help China.
How long ago was this?
2017, 2018, 2019, 2020. I think one of the things that Trump did very effectively was open people's eyes to the unfairness. He looked at it in the trade with a trade lens, and he's absolutely right. How come, simplistically, how come if we sell a car to China, they charge, a 20% tariff, but if they not car, whatever, we sell a good to China, it's 20%, and when they sell something to us, it's 2%. Shouldn't there be reciprocity? Like, shouldn't the tariffs be the same? We're getting screwed. And, President Trump is a deal maker, and he saw us getting ripped off. And I think his perspective was, we're getting ripped off because we're allowing ourselves to get ripped off, which is stupid. And so he decided to make trade changes, put companies on entity lists, and really start pushing back. And when he did, all of a sudden people said, wait, he's kind of right. And in retrospect, he was 100% right on this. But it goes far, far beyond trade.
Where else does it go?
Everywhere. So let's understand what we're dealing with. And I think this is a very important thing for you and your listeners to understand. China is not like anything we've faced before. It is an adversary. It's not a competitor, right? Great power competition. We are in an invisible war, and it's been going on for a long time. You say, what does that mean, an invisible war? Well, it takes many forms, and the vectors of attack are seemingly nowhere but everywhere at the same time. Intellectual property theft. Okay.
After half a mile, take the exit.
We lose more
15A,
every year in
A43
intellectual property
towards
theft
Oxford,
than
then
in
bear
almost
left.
anything. Hundreds and hundreds of billions of dollars have been stolen by China to advance their
Take the
manufacturing,
exit,
to advance their
15A,
dual-use technologies, to
then
advance
bear
their
left.
military, and so forth. This is happening at universities. This is happening at companies. I mean, it was like 2 months ago that a Chinese citizen working at Google left the company with a thumb drive, and he was on his way to Beijing. This is happening every day. You have
After
Chinese
500
scientists at
feet,
Livermore
turn
Labs
left, bear
or
left,
wherever
then
stealing
turn left
stuff.
on the roundabout
So there's
and take
that
the first
element,
exit.
which I think a lot of people understand. What people may not
Left on the
understand
roundabout and
is
take the
China's
first exit.
ties to organized crime and to money laundering operations. The Chinese at this point have as much, if not more, power than the cartels because they are the money bags behind everything. We
After
lose,
600 feet,
what,
go right on the
100,000
roundabout
people to
and take the
fentanyl
third
every year?
exit.
In World War II, we lost, what,
Go right on the
400,000
roundabout
people?
and take the
We're
third
losing
exit,
a
A43
quarter of
towards
the people we
Oxford.
lost in World War II every year. And by the way, all the APIs, all the precursors to fentanyl come from one place. They come from China. And it's hard for me to everything, and they are. It's hard for me to fathom that they wouldn't be willingly trying to poison the United States. It's deliberate. So there's that. We have across the
exit,
world,
A43,
the United States
Letchworth
being
bypass.
thwarted by the likes of Iran, Hezbollah, Hamas, certainly Russia, in this hemisphere, Venezuela, and a lot of it goes
Follow
back to China.
A43,
There is a new
Letchworth
axis
bypass
that's
towards
developing,
Oxford for 5.5
and China is
miles.
the economic might behind all of this. And so we're seeing it play out in lots of different places, and it wouldn't surprise me if it's coordinated.
It seems to me like they have us at pretty much every angle. It scares the hell out of me. I mean,
Remember Daryl Morley?
I don't.
He was the GM for a big basketball team. Let's say the Mavs. It'll come back to me. I'm getting a brain fog moment. But he tweeted something in support of the Hong Kong pro-democracy protesters, and he got pilloried by everybody in the NBA. And so why? Because the NBA makes a ton of money broadcasting in China, and the Chinese picked up the phone and said, this guy's got to go. There are only something like 40 American movies that are screened in China every year, and so Hollywood falls over itself to appease China to make sure that the movie can hit the Chinese censorship apparatus. So everything is compromised. Universities make money when people pay full tuition, and you've got 300,000 Chinese kids in America largely paying full tuition. So the universities are like, I'm not going to talk about China. Think tanks. A think tank will be encouraged by China to write a puff piece or a neutral piece on a given topic, like what China's doing in Africa. Okay, and China will say, "Hey, here's a few million bucks. There's more to come. We want to see what the outcome is." The think tank will write a piece, like a big Washington think tank, which will get picked up by the New York Times, which will get picked up by the Washington Post, and the next thing you know, China is a benevolent actor in Africa. Wait, how did that happen? If you were to dissect it, how did it happen? And so, again, the vectors, it's invisible, but it's happening everywhere. And it's very scary. And they have a goal, and the goal is to kind of push us out of the picture and install their system. And their system is a state-driven economic model and centralized control and authoritarianism. Our model is freedom of the individual, autonomy, and free market capitalism. These two systems are irreconcilable, okay? So this is what we're fighting. So it's more than just a country. It's what we're fighting is an ideology. We're not fighting the Chinese people, we're fighting the Chinese Communist Party. And they mean to take us out. And they have said, we will take Taiwan, we will be the powerhouse in robotics and AI and synthetic biology and semiconductors. This is what we're gonna do, and we'll leave a few crumbs to everybody else as long as they toe the line. And America's just kind of in our way at this point. And I don't understand how our policymakers don't see this with clarity, because it's so obvious.
I don't either. How much influence do they have over our policymakers?
I don't know. We had a member of Congress that was, sleeping with a Chinese spy.
I mean, it seems to me that they are also very, how do I say, very, I mean, they'll build our policymakers' businesses over there, correct? And then they get hooked on the money, and then they can yank that business at any moment because it's a communist country. For example, it's my understanding that Mitch McConnell has a shipping business, a Chinese shipping business.
Well, his wife, Elaine Chao, and the Chao family has long-standing ties to the CCP back to the Jiang Zemin days. And so, yeah, of course. Dianne Feinstein, RIP, had a driver for 20 years who was a Chinese spy. But that's the overt stuff. The more nefarious stuff is it's very plausible and very likely that Chinese companies are hiring lobbyists in the United States to lobby on behalf of whatever, TikTok or whatnot. Chinese companies may invest in American businesses that in turn have money to donate to politicians. And then of course, you have an entire, let's take the automotive sector. If Ford or Volkswagen or major automobile companies were to leave China, it would result in a massive problem to their bottom line and to their share price. And the last thing they want to do is upset their shareholders. And so they don't want anything to change. And then of course you've got Wall Street, who is singularly focused on one thing, and that is maximizing profit. And they're doubling down on China, and they have been for years. That's starting to reel itself back because they're recognizing that they're not making money anymore. That's really the reason why they're dialing it back. And they see geopolitical conflict. But if China were doing well economically, they'd feed at the trough of Chinese stocks day in and day out. And these are American fund managers. They're like, I don't care, I'm here to make money. And don't get me wrong, I get it. If you're a fund manager, you have a fiduciary responsibility, you have a moral responsibility to make sure that your pensioners, grandma gets her pension check. And you will invest wherever there's money to be made. Okay, I get it. You have to balance that, however, with patriotism. And sometimes you may be investing in a company in China that's building parts for the next weapon that's going to kill our soldiers. And so you have to balance patriotism with making money.
You had mentioned, speaking of weapons, you had mentioned quantum communications in space.
Yep.
What is that?
Something that I'm clearly not capable of fully explaining because I'm not a quantum physicist. I don't understand in the quantum world how you can be a 0 and a 1 at the same time, but we'll table that for a second. It's a means of communication that relies on new technologies that can't be hacked, can't be traced, and I think people are trying to still figure out how it all works.
Is this quantum entanglement?
Yeah, it's quantum entanglement. You can basically have a base station on Earth and a satellite, and through quantum entanglement and quantum communication, and they're making advancements in technologies that we need to be mindful of.
Are they more advanced than we are?
In many ways, yeah.
How else so?
Well, I mean, consider if you think anti-CCP or anti-Xi Jinping, so they've created filters and blockers to make sure that the AI is fosters Xi Jinping thought, which is a strategic blunder. But they have huge data sets. They own the entire ecosystem of drones. DJI is a drone company. It's Chinese, and nobody can compete with them at this point. And so they just manufacture drones better and cheaper and at scale that we just can't compete with. Shipbuilding. We can't build ships anymore in the United States, especially naval ships. And you can't throw,
Follow
you can keep throwing money at Huntington Ingalls Industries, a big shipbuilder, or an electric boat, the submarine builder. But they still can't build them fast enough. China's crunching out new ships. Every 4 years, they create the equivalent of the British Navy. We can't compete with that because we don't have shipbuilding capacity. Hypersonic missiles, something that we discarded years ago. They took our technology and they've created hypersonic missiles that are really good and really scary. Satellites, they're launching constellations of satellites. What are we doing? They're going to, at least they've purported to want to build a moon base. They're going to build it. And so I think if there's a thread in this conversation, it's that we need to get our game on, because these are very, very serious times, and it requires serious thinking to figure out what we do.
Are they creating a lot of the division that we're seeing?
No, I think a lot of that is self-hatred. We've been rich for a long time as a country, and I think as enough time passes and generations become wealthier and wealthier, they look for nonsense to think about. When you're not thinking about your daily needs, you start thinking about other things that are, in my opinion, stupid. So you create problems out of nothing. So a lot of it is our doing. However, do I believe that there are influence operations? Do I believe that our adversaries, whether it's Russia or China or Iran or Hamas, do they affect our ability to, are they influencing social media? Yeah.
What about, there's got to be at least a glimmer of hope. I hope. But I also want to talk to you about BRICS.
Sure.
It's my understanding that BRICS is, the entire mission is to devalue the US dollar and completely wipe it off the...
All right, let's begin with glimmer of hope and then we'll go into BRICS.
Okay.
At the end of the day, I am a firm believer in the American spirit. And I believe that freedom, people often think of freedom and they think it's, a meme of some kind, of Mel Gibson and, Scotland with a blue face and freedom, but it's, what freedom means is anybody in the United States can make it. From a single mom that came from Cuba with no college education to a half Kenyan president of the United States, anybody can make it here. And you have the freedom through hard work, the application of effort, through taking risks, and from just busting your ass, you can do anything here. And so I think if we harness that energy that we still have in the United States, we will prevail. So there is hope, 100%. But we need the will and we need the leadership to harness that. We can't tell generations and generations of American kids that our country sucks, that we're not worth fighting for, that we're irredeemably, evil or racist or something, because that's not who we are. Have we had a troubled history? Sure, but every country has. The Roman Empire, every country, every place of note, every important society has had their share of flaws. But I think we are a force for good. So there is hope. We'll pivot here to BRICS. So BRICS, I'll tell you the story. Back, 25 years ago, there was a guy at Goldman Sachs whose name was O'Neill, if my Alzheimer's is working correctly. And he coined a phrase called BRICS: Brazil, Russia, India, and China. That's what it stands for. And he said, these are the countries that are going to be important in the future. Look at their population, it's huge. Look at the number of young people they have. Look at how their economies are growing. We should pay attention to these 4 countries. That's how it started, from a guy at Goldman Sachs. Since then, a lot of fund managers have put a lot of money into the BRICS countries, thinking that their stock markets would would perform well. Foreign direct investment plowed into these countries, particularly China. And for a while, the BRICS was like a thing. China developed the notion of creating a BRICS bank, where you take these four countries, and now you can glom on other, South Africa wanted to join, and then Mexico and Saudi Arabia. Now it's become, bigger than it originally was, but it's still called BRICS. And so China in Shanghai developed the BRICS Bank. Now it's called the New Development Bank. And its objective is, today, its current incarnation is, how can we conduct trade in the global south? I'm throwing these like names at you. The global south is like the developing world, so that we can trade with each other more freely. Up until, for the last many decades, trade has been conducted using the dollar as the unit of intermediation, right? Whether commodities, the currency that underpin commodities has always been dollars. So when you buy oil's traded in dollars, whether it's in Saudi Arabia or whether it's in the UAE or whether it's in Indonesia. It's a dollar system. And so the BRICS are saying, why should we have to transit the US dollar to trade soybeans from Brazil to China? Isn't there a way that we can do this internally? They're not going to create a currency, a BRICS currency, but they're trying to figure out how they square away the plumbing, the financial plumbing, so that they don't have to go through the dollar as the intermediary. So that's what's going on.
How does that affect us?
If the dollar isn't the reserve currency, we're screwed. Like, we become, Argentina. It can be very bad. So let's back up. I'll begin with our fiscal deficits, and I'll take this back to why the dollar is important.
Yeah.
So right now, we spend $7 trillion. That's the latest budget proposal. And we generate in tax revenue like 4.9 trillion, right? So there's a deficit of, roughly $2 trillion a year. Now, people don't understand unless you can make it real for them. So let's take out a bunch of zeros. Let's assume you as an individual are making $49,000 a year and you're spending $70,000 a year. Well, okay, that's bad. That's fiscally irresponsible, but that's what we're doing as a country. If it's you as an individual in that scenario where you're like $20,000 short every year, what do? Well, you max out your credit card 1 year. Okay, that covers you the first year. The second year, you take out a loan from the bank to pay maybe your credit card or whatnot. But over time, that's not sustainable. So what happens is when we have a shortfall, the way we generate revenue in shortfalls, other than tax revenue, right? Tax revenues are 4.9 trillion. How do you get to 7? Well, we issue bonds, right? So we sell bonds around the world, and when people don't buy, for whatever reason, the Fed buys the bonds. The Fed is the buyer of last resort. So you've seen the Fed balance sheet basically go from like 4 trillion to like 8 trillion because they're the ones buying everything. Well, how are they buying it? Well, they buy it by printing money. And so the printing presses have been off the charts, certainly since COVID and throughout this administration. And that, of course, has caused inflation and a lot of other problems, which we can go into. Now, the artificial demand for dollars around the world is largely due to the banks have the dollar sitting in reserves, okay? And also because the dollar is used as the unit of trade for commodities, for foreign exchange. Like if you want to go from Colombian pesos to, Indonesian rupiah, you have to go through the dollar. Mm-hmm. If the dollar isn't there, because nobody wants to use the dollar, we're screwed. All that artificial demand for dollars disappears, and we crater. We're not going to forget financing the next aircraft carrier. We're not going to be able to pay Medicare. And that's when things get really, really bad.
And take the second exit,
and it just takes leadership in our government, in our Congress, and in our executive branch to say, enough. We can't fund everything. And there are things that, look, we have 88 million people on Medicare, 65 million people on Medicaid, 8 million on disability, 44 million on food stamps. That's like, I don't know, I'm not good at doing math in my head, but that's like a little over 200 million people in America that depend on the government. That's not sustainable.
There's only, 350 million?
340 million, something like that, 336. So so we have to do something to really rein in our spending. And we're adding $1 trillion of debt every 100 days.
After half a mile, cross the
And so,
roundabout and
Who,
take
who,
the second exit.
why do we
A43.
owe the debt to?
Or mainly ourselves. We do have a bunch of foreign debt buyers. China had at some point, close to, maybe $1.5 trillion or 2 trillion, and they've been paring that down. They've been selling. Why? Because they don't want to get sanctioned. They learned from Russia. Once Russia invaded Ukraine, we basically sanctioned everything. We took all their money and we're like, okay, it's ours. So when you have a central bank that has dollars in reserves, it's not like there are bales and bales of money sitting in the Russian central bank in a dungeon. It's sitting at the Fed. And so we can turn the money off whenever we want. And so China was like, I don't know that I like this. So I think I'm going to start selling treasuries. So it's a problem. And the debt is a problem for many reasons. We're always issuing new debt, and there's debt that gets paid back. And as we start paying back some of these shorter duration loans and bonds and government obligations, we have to borrow at a new rate. And that new rate is really high. And so, the 3 month, I think, is like 5% and change. It used to be 0. And so now we're borrowing money at higher interest rates, which means we have to pay, our government is paying more in interest on our debt, like over $1 trillion in interest alone. And we're paying 850 billion for our Defense Department. We're paying more in interest, just in interest to service the debt, than we are paying for the Defense Department. You tell me, is that sustainable? We're screwed unless somebody changes things in a very radical way. And in DC, nobody seems to care.
So the people that own the debt are
the Fed,
bonds.
The
People buy bonds.
Yes, the notes and the bonds. There's an entire marketplace. Some are owned by big financial firms. Your 401k probably has a bunch of government bonds in it. So it's owned by ourselves individually through our 401ks. It's owned by large corporations like BlackRock and Vanguard and so forth, Goldman Sachs. It's owned by the Fed. It's owned by institutional buyers, foreign buyers like the Saudis and the Japanese. It's owned by a lot of people.
And can they call and collect?
So the way a bond works is, I owe you $100. I'll pay you back in 5 years with interest. I pay 5% interest a year, and then in 5 years, I pay you the principal.
Keep right.
So they do come to collect once the bond is due.
And that's what the foreign countries are doing as well.
Yeah,
They're buying so it's all bonds. It is all.
So you have many types of government obligations. You've got a 3 month, you've got a 6 month, you've got a 10-year, a 5-year. So there are lots of bond durations. And there's a giant marketplace for this. People are buying and selling these bonds all the time. It's not like that IOU that you just purchased from me, like I owe you $100, I'll pay back in 5 years. You can take that IOU and sell it to your sister. And your sister can sell it. And then there becomes a secondary market for these. And there's like a giant marketplace of people buying and selling bonds.
Okay. So what does it look like when we default?
Keep right.
I don't want to be around when that happens. I'll be in a Mennonite colony in Paraguay, living off the land or something. No, but joking aside, it can be it can get very bad very quickly.
Can you paint a scenario?
Sure. A scenario where it can happen very brief, very quickly, and it can happen over a long. It can get very bad very quickly.
Can you paint a scenario?
Sure. A scenario
Cross the
where
roundabout and take the
it can
second
happen
exit.
very brief, very quickly, and it can happen over a long period of time. Over a long period of time, people start losing faith in the dollar. Our obligations become less and less valuable to them. Faith and credit in the U.S. dollar
Follow
becomes
A43 for 3
impaired.
miles.
The dollar loses a tremendous amount of value. It depreciates significantly compared to a lot of other places. We see huge amounts of inflation, perhaps hyperinflation, or it can happen very suddenly, where we just can't meet the obligations of the federal government. So, we have $7 trillion that we need to pay out every year in whatever, right? And maybe we have to fire people. We have to fire the 24 million government workers. By the way, there are twice the number of government employees than there are manufacturing employees.
Man, that's
12 million versus 24 million. So
when you told me that last night, that blew my mind.
maybe we have to fire people. Maybe people have to take a haircut on their what they think that they're due. Maybe we can't afford a lot of the social programs, some of which are very important to people in poor communities. And these people in poor communities are saying, well, that was my lifeblood. Like, now I can't buy food. And people get really pissed off.
I mean, maybe if we just quit funding Ukraine.
Yeah, I don't follow the Ukraine, Russia as much as I do China, but I don't understand how cooler heads can't prevail and get us to some peaceful outcome. At this point, it's probably too late, but I have hope that future leaders in the United States will take an important role in getting these two sides to the table and saying, let's figure out a way to end this. It's in everybody's best interest to end this thing. And I think Putin is obviously indefensible. But I just don't know what the strategy is. If you were to sit down and talk to anybody in Washington and say, what's our desired end state? Do we want regime change in Russia? Is that this desired end state? No, we can't do that. Well, is it to preserve the territorial integrity of Ukraine? Okay, yeah, I can buy that. But how do we do this? So I'm a first principles thinker. What is your desired end state? And let's go back and get there. But I'm not quite sure what we're trying to do. Maybe because I'm not in the know. And again, I'll caveat this with, I'm not following the Russia-Ukraine issue as much as I'm following the China issue.
Well, I mean, I'm asking you because of what you're a part of now, the venture capital firm in defense stuff. And so could it be that it is the military industrial complex companies, Lockheed Martin?
So is Lockheed and, are they pulling the strings behind Ukraine? I don't know.
Yeah, what I'm asking is, are they lobbying Washington to vote this in so that they can send their weapons over to Ukraine?
I'm not really in the know on those discussions. I really couldn't tell you.
Okay.
What I'm more concerned about is that we're pretty much out of javelins. We're pretty much out of 155 rounds. We're out of a lot of stuff. Our arsenals are getting depleted. And if there's ever a real shooting war over in Asia,
keep left.
what are we going to do? That's my bigger concern. And so I think that we need to start very quickly, because something is going to go down in Asia when we least expect it, and we're not going to be prepared.
Mm-hmm.
And it's in things that are seemingly nonsensical that are super important. I'll give you an illustration. A few days ago, China restricted sales of a metal known as antimony to the West. Both China and Russia together, they comprise probably like 85% of the world antimony market. Why is antimony important? Because we need it to make bullets. without antimony, we don't have bullets. We don't have ammo, right? Because they mix it with lead and whatever. So a bullet is made of a bunch of different metals that are forged together. It's an alloy. And antimony forms an integral part of that. China's like, oh, guess what? No more antimony for you guys. So I ask you, how are we going to make bullets? What's the plan? And it's something as esoteric and like stupid as a minor metal, but that minor metal is super important to everything else. China restricted gallium and germanium 6 months ago, and those are crucial ingredients to make
After 300
semiconductors.
feet, keep left.
And China
then
says,
take the
well,
motorway.
sorry guys, they're not leaving. So gallium and germanium prices, exploded. And so these are things that, are seeming. There's hope, man. We're America.
Yeah.
And I think with like I said before, with good leadership, with humility, and I think a return to our roots. Look, I'm a man of faith. I don't wear it on my sleeve or anything, but I think that it would be good for the United States, many of us at a ground level, not the government, to return to our Judeo-Christian roots, especially when things are on fire. It's like the story of the pilot who was flying into the landing strip, a commercial pilot, and his rudder stopped working, and so he called
M14 towards Newbury for
the flight
4.5
deck in
miles.
the tower and said, "Oh my God, my rudder is flailing." And he was told by the tower, "Okay, listen, here's how you fix it. You've got to do this, that, and the other, and press these buttons, and just repeat after me. Flaps, check. Engines, check. Rudder, check. Okay, good." And he kept going down the approach, and all of a sudden his left engine caught on fire, and he calls the tower again and says, "Oh my gosh, what do I do? The engine's on fire." And they went through the same rigmarole, and the buttons, and turn off the fuel and repeat after me. Flaps check, right engine checked, rudder check. Okay, good. A few seconds later, the other engine's on fire, and the tower says, "Okay, repeat after me. Our Father, who art in heaven." So it's a joke, but I think that when we're in a difficult situation, I think the best thing we can do is to pray, get back to our value system, and just brush the dust off and get back on our feet. We will prevail.
Yeah, I hope we do that. I'd like to circle back on some of these. We're going to totally switch it up here. Sorry
right.
about that. I'd like to circle back on some of the Web3 stuff.
Sure.
What is Web3?
What I alluded to earlier. Web3 is decentralized finance. So, in simplistic terms, centralized finance is everything is at a central server, central location. Visa, for example, has something called VisaNet. It is gigantic. So it's in the DC area. Think of a football fields of servers that are processing my credit card transaction at Walgreens or CV, whatever. And so it's saying Eric is Eric, Walgreens is Walgreens, and they're matching these transactions. They're using Know Your Client. They're making sure that I have enough credit in my account to pay, that Walgreens is, so there's a lot of stuff happening in all of these servers in a centralized location, right? Check, centralized. Decentralized, imagine that server farm, that's the right word, atomized, dispersed along a lot of different servers everywhere. And so my transaction is not going to a central place. It's bouncing. That same transaction is bouncing upon a lot of different servers.
Okay. So this is only finance?
Well, you can do
Or is this
decentralized identity, right? Let's assume at some point, you're going to have a passport, an electronic version of a passport. You can do decentralized identity where your all of your information resides in lots of different computers everywhere. You can decentralize lots of things. But
So is it a new internet?
it's a new way of transacting between people or between entities or between institutions. Yeah.
Okay.
Where the transaction eliminates the middleman. That's super simplistic. We can really go into the weeds and lots of different things, but getting too technical sometimes just people zone out. But yeah, and you can do it in a trustless environment. So right now, the VisaNet exists because I'm a trusted agent in the system, and Walgreens is a trusted agent in the system. But in a world that, in a trustless society, you can decentralize a lot of stuff.
Okay.
So, hence the origin of Bitcoin. I would encourage anybody who's listening to read the original Bitcoin white paper. It's like 8 or 9 pages long, but it lays it all out.
Okay.
It's really good. That's what started it all.
We had a good discussion about Bitcoin last night.
Sure.
And I was, how do I say it? I was surprised to hear you seemingly pro Bitcoin. I haven't talked to a lot of people in finance who like Bitcoin.
Why wouldn't it be? It's an asset class like any other. You can go jogging on the treadmill and watch CNBC and watch, the stock tickers, and you see the prices of gold and soybeans and oh, guess what? Bitcoin is there. It's a real asset class. It's a legitimate asset class. People are able to buy Bitcoin ETFs. And so it's really, it's a version of digital gold. So it's an asset class that rises and falls like any other, commodity. But it's a perfectly legitimate asset class.
Does it concern you at all that nobody really knows who created it?
Does it concern me? No, because to date, Bitcoin, it's been a decade, and it's still working just fine.
Okay.
And while there have been hiccups along the way, the hiccups haven't been related to the Bitcoin architecture itself. The hacks that you hear.
Well, Eric, we're kind of, we've covered a lot so far.
A lot.
And, but I want to get into what you're doing now.
Okay. Well, when the Trump administration left and Biden transitioned in, I thought to myself, what am I going to do? I'm 50 years old, and I want to do something intentional and purposeful. And so as I started thinking about what to do, I had really two tracks. One track is I think we covered a lot of it earlier. How can the United States remain the preeminent global currency? And how do we need to think about the Chinese central bank digital currency with its authoritarian hand and how it could potentially be hurtful for the rest of the world? I didn't cover this. But China has what's known as a social credit score. Are you familiar with this?
Somewhat.
Yeah, so at a baseline, think of your credit score when you go to a bank. They're going to want to know, do you have bills outstanding? How much debt do you have? Do you pay your bills on time? And you're given a score, right? Now, take that and give it steroids. Did you buy diapers? Are you a good father? Great, your score goes up. Do you engage in pro Xi Jinping rallies? Have you read Xi Jinping's thought leadership guide? All these things make you go up or down in the social score ratings, to the point where there are apps on the phone in China today where if there's an individual with a low social credit score near you, you can avoid them.
Are you kidding me?
No, it's
I
really
did not
bad.
know that.
It's not a Black Mirror episode. This is reality. as you're crossing the street, if you're jaywalking, the cameras are monitoring you through facial recognition. The phone is geolocating you, and as you're jaywalking, the system is taking money out of your bank account for jaywalking, right? And so everything you do is monitored, and that includes, of course, your purchases. And the Chinese digital currency is a part of a broader plan to impose government will on its citizenry, right? That's frightening. And so I was, how do we help the US dollar and how do we preserve freedom? And that got me down the rabbit hole of Bitcoin and decentralized finance and so forth. So that was one track. The second track that I've spent the last several years on is I went back to my roots as a naval officer, and I came to a few conclusions. The oceans are important, and they're important for a lot of reasons. For the last several decades, 25% of the fish have been depleted from the ocean. I live on the water in Miami. Like, the ocean is important to me. So China's building, 4 times the number of ships that we are, 10 times the number. They have a 300-to-1 shipbuilding advantage in tonnage to the United States.
300-to-1.
300-to-1. Commercial shipping lines are getting attacked by Houthis in the Red Sea with, Zodiacs and Stinger missiles, right? So it's seemingly out of the blue, the maritime domain has become important. So together with a team of folks, we created a fund focused on the intersection of technology and the maritime domain. So tech, companies, and maritime, with basically 3 pillars that hold up our strategy. The first is commercial shipping. How do we make it more efficient? Can we put Internet of Things inside of shipping vessels that you can track everything from how the engine room is doing, just like you have sensors on your car, right? Can you put cameras on the ship that can allow you to see navigational obstacles way in advance so that you don't have to, do crazy turns and you can save gas? So port software. China controls like 80% of the world's software that operates ports. It's crazy. That's a national security issue. Anyway, so commercial is one leg. The second leg is sustainability, whether it's countering illegal fishing, mapping the ocean floor, or decarbonizing ships, because the International Maritime Organization has mandated that ships lower their carbon footprint. So that could mean technologies around new paint coatings, new propulsion systems, things like that. And the third leg, so track 1 is commercial, track 2 is sustainability, and track 3 is national security. That probably needs no explanation. So that's what we do. We invest in tech companies, and we're looking to not just invest in them, but make them better, help our portfolio companies along, and hopefully make a meaningful change to the world's oceans.
What else are you guys mapping over there?
Well, we invested in a company so we're a fund. Mm-hmm. And so what we do is we invest in companies. One of those companies makes a drone that maps the ocean floor. And so think about, when you mow your lawn and you're kind of going backwards and forwards, and, you can map a kilometer of ocean floor and find, there's a little hill there, there's a mountain there, oh look, there's a ravine. And why are you doing this? So that you can put the next fiber optic cable. You're going to need to know where to put it. You're going to need to potentially track marine mammal migrations, where you're going to put the next offshore wind turbine. From the national security standpoint, a concern is that perhaps China or adversaries have put ordnance on the ocean floor. So there are a lot of things, and there are a lot of reasons. Just like you have Google Earth, mm-hmm. right? 2/3 of our planet is ocean, but we haven't mapped the ocean floor. So I think we need to, and the United Nations has mandated that we map 27 times the size of the United States over the next few decades.
Wow.
So yeah, there's going to be a lot to do in that space. But that's just one of our, various companies that we're investing in.
Which ones is there one in particular that you're most excited about?
I'm excited about all of them.
Okay.
And what I'm really excited about is the mentality and the entrepreneurial spirit that we have in the United States, where you have founders that are making the most amazing things and inventing the most amazing things. And I'm like I said before, the American spirit is alive and well, and we will prevail. And we will prevail because we have founders and we have entrepreneurs that have the stamina, the creativity, and the desire to just build and do awesome things. And I'm in awe of the folks that we're investing in, many of them. So
that's what gives me hope, is that to create in this country. And that's important.
And we will prevail. So thank you for chatting with me. I hope I wasn't too loopy or said anything nutty, but just gave you a little bit of my background, and very happy to be here.
It was an amazing interview, fascinating. I learned a ton. I know the audience did too. And I gotta say this: I would love to be connected with somebody at the executive level at that underwater drone program to interview them.
Sure.
And I would like to ask you if you had 3 recommendations for me to interview, who would they be?
Elon Musk comes to mind. Just iconic people that have done amazing things. Elon Musk, for example, I'm not sure if he's human. How do you create an electric car company, a space company, a satellite company, Neuralink, Twitter? I don't know how he does it, but he is seemingly successful in many, many disciplines. And it's just awe-inspiring that America was able to attract, because he's from South Africa, attract somebody to come to the United States and do these amazing things, and has given him the opportunity to succeed the way he has. But I'm sure I'll come up with other names. Those are just the iconic, top of mind folks.
Those are some big ones. I appreciate it.
All right.
Well, Eric, I also really appreciate you coming to Franklin and doing this interview, and it's been a real honor, and I learned a ton. So God bless. Best of luck to you.
Thanks.
It's Rich Eisen here. Join me and my compadre, Chris Brockman, every Monday on the Overreaction Monday podcast.
Rich, Jameis has taken the Browns to the playoffs. Dude, why can't they win 7-8 games to finish the year? Why not?
Family time, chilling with a book time, or time to visit your nan time. Go on, play some other time. Put your phone down. Tombola, open for fun. Terms apply. 18+. Gambleaware.org.
Pete Hegseth, welcome to the show.
Hey,
man.
Sean, thanks for having me.
It's good to finally see you in person. I see you on TV all the time, but
Likewise, if I had $1 for every person that met him, do you know Sean Ryan? That guy's the man. I'd be a rich man, so thanks for making this happen.
Very cool, very cool. Well, you got a new book out, The War on Warriors. I definitely want to talk about that. Let's talk about the educational system, and then we had a mini conversation about Tim Walz, and so we'll talk about his background as well, and what you know about that, because I haven't had a minute to dive into everything he's claiming lately. So, but I figured if anybody knows, it's you. So, starting off with a quick down and dirty introduction. Pete Hegseth, husband, father, patriot, and a Christian man. You're an Army veteran of Iraq, Afghanistan, Guantanamo Bay, earning 2 Bronze Stars and a combat infantry badge. You are most known for being the host of Fox and Friends Weekend and of multiple series on Fox Nation. You're the author of the New York Times bestseller, Battle for the American Mind. You recently wrote a book called The War on Warriors, Behind the Betrayal of Men Who Keep Us Free. You served as CEO of Concerned Veterans of America. What is that?
It's a veterans advocacy organization.
What do you guys concentrate on?
Concentrated on trying to get the
After
VA
1.6
in the business of
miles,
actually serving
keep
vets
right.
instead of serving the bureaucracy.
Nice.
Yeah.
Are you guys making headway?
Well, I'm not doing it anymore. The organization's still around. Yeah, we made some huge headway during the Trump administration. The Accountability Act and the Choice Act that he was a part of were, I don't know if we, I think it'd be pretty fair to say we were the brainchild of those behind the scenes. Put out, just pushing hard the idea that the VA doesn't exist to perpetuate its own bureaucracy by spending more money. The veteran should be at the center. And if you're a bullshit VA employee and you're jacking around on company time, you should be able to be fired. Just like anywhere else.
So are they getting fired now?
Mostly not.
Hold on, let me think. No?
Mostly not, because of course the bureaucracy fought against it in every single way. All the government unions came out against it, even though it was passed. It was used in some very narrow instances, but for the most part, especially under Biden, they brought all the civil service protections against the law. By the way, the law states you can fire. They just choose not to because even all the political appointees abide by the rules of the unions, and so they want to play nice. And so even though they could expedite firings of VA officials who are, I don't know, like watching porn at work or like not serving vets in a timely manner, they usually don't. So it was the right thing to do. I think it could be reapplied under Trump very effectively, frankly, across government, but most importantly at the VA. But in the hands of Democrats, they're not doing anything with it.
Go figure. And you currently serve in the Individual Ready Reserve.
Well, I did as of, not anymore. I'm out now.
Congratulations.
Yes.
Congratulations.
A water's warm.
Do you go? Let's talk about the VA. Do you go to the VA?
I do not.
I don't either.
No.
Why do you think the bureaucrats are fighting so hard just to? Like, what's the problem? Like, why don't they want to fix the fucking VA?
Well, it's a permanent feeding trough, and you see of high-paying jobs and stable jobs that you can't be fired from with an upper echelon of brass numbering in the thousands that get paid more than the chairman of the Joint Chiefs, and they're great, easy, comfy jobs, many of which are now remote, even at the VA. Since COVID, they've never come back. And then the problem is it's a feedback loop. You and I would probably talk a lot about the military-industrial complex, all these outside, the companies that influence the way we procure weapons and the way we fight. Well, there's a veterans industrial complex too. And the traditional names, the VFW, the Legion, AMVETS, you name them, they've got big offices in Washington, D.C., and they are invested in one thing, namely, a bigger VA budget. A bigger VA budget means more programs that they collaborate with. They say it is to serve their members, but if you talk to their members, which is what we actually did in the organization, is like, hey, we don't care what VFW headquarters thinks. We care what the post level thinks. What do those guys think? They're saying, hey, why am I driving 200 miles to go to some hospital where I'll wait for months for an appointment when I could be seen inside my own community if the dollars followed me and I wanted to do that locally? Well, the VA hates that because it would, heaven forbid, their budget might reduce or their facilities might not be used as robustly, then they don't keep getting the money. Well, then the vets groups don't benefit as much from that. So it's a typical swampy feedback loop. The politicians don't really know how the VA works, and so they just want a good press conference, and that means just writing bigger checks. The whole thing never, but they get to feel good about it, right? Oh, I support the vets. I support funding for the VA. But is the VA working? Like, can you get in on time? Usually the healthcare is actually pretty good at the VA once you get in, once you get to see a doctor, once you have a stable relationship with a doctor. But getting through and getting in is half the challenge. And so it's a big problem.
Man, I went there one time. Well, I guess more than once, but after I got, my benefits. I went there one time for an appointment and I was like, I'll buy my own health insurance. Like this, no, I'm not doing this. I don't need any more pills. Sorry, thank you. I've only heard one thing good come out of the VA, and that's, have you heard of this Dr. Freeze guy?
Yes.
He's He's written a book on that they're calling this. It's like I'm gonna butcher this, so whoever's listening that knows about this, don't kill me here. But it's like another. It seems to me like they've not repurposed. It's a different PTSD, I guess is basically what I'm saying, called operator syndrome, and they're tying in PTSD with traumatic brain injuries, but not like massive traumatic brain injuries, like stuff you get from shooting a Carl Gustav or slapping breacher charges on doors a lot. I'm not talking like a big BBID or something. Sleep dep, and they're tying it all into like this new form of PTSD. It sounds pretty interesting, I know.
Well, dude, if that's what the VA exists to do,
Yeah, well,
right?
Yeah.
Specialize on stuff for guys that saw things that the outside world doesn't really understand, and focus on delivering the care that those guys and gals need. But we fund a VA bureaucracy, a healthcare system that, the outside world does a good job treating diabetes. The outside world does a good job treating cancer. Those aren't necessarily veteran-specific illnesses. So if the VA would specialize more on the things it does really well, it's comparative advantage, and you fund those things, and then you don't have to have the country's largest healthcare system that's not run very well, and instead you allow the private market to provide for vets that can be seen in a timely manner. We wrote a whole report on it called the Fixing Veterans Healthcare Task Force. It feels like forever ago. It was like 2014. It was a bipartisan deal. And that's exactly what we said. That's where the name came from. I don't know exactly what he does exactly, but those folks that specialize and do it best, they're the ones that should be the focus. And then on the general healthcare side, that can be done other ways.
Yeah. What would you personally like to see happen in the VA or to the VA?
Well, first of all, I would. That's a great question, and we wrote a whole report on it. And I guess in a perfect world, I would have, like I just said, I would have it focus on its core mission, and then I would. The critics would say, "Oh, you want to privatize the VA?" That's not the idea. The idea is to effectively let the dollars follow the veteran. So, and the Mission Act did that Trump passed, which the VA is trying to squelch.
What is the problem with privatizing the VA? As far as I know, and I've interviewed a lot of vets that have done a lot of kind of wazoo, off-the-wall treatments that actually work, but all these treatments that are making major headway, like psychedelics.
Yep.
None of this is being developed from within the VA. It's all privates. A lot of it's out of the country. We can't even do the shit that helps us in the country. I'm one of them. I did psychedelics. I did Ibogaine in Mexico, and it changed my life in so many different ways. I haven't had a drop of booze in 2.5 years. I didn't even go down there for that. And way more in the moment with my family. Anyways, whatever. None of these non-traditional treatments or things that are working for traumatic brain injury, PTSD, anxiety, all these things that are, that guys are dealing with coming out. None of it's being cured by the VA. None of it.
Big surprise. The government is not here to help.
And so why would anybody, other than I get the VA employees and the bureaucrats within it, but why would anybody be against privatizing veteran healthcare? It's just better health.
Let me tell you this. That's exactly right. Nothing you said is wrong. I was in 2016, I was under consideration by Trump to be his VA secretary.
Nice.
I was interviewed multiple times. In fact, I was down to the final two. And, go up to Trump Tower, up the elevator, sit with him, talk about it. And ultimately, I think he thought I was a little young and all that. But I remember he called me at one point in the process, and he said, Pete, I want to pick you. But there's one problem. Why do all the veterans groups hate you? And I sort of laughed. And he goes, no, but they hate you. And I'm like, well, Mr. President, let me tell you why. Because outside the box thinking of, say, providing private choice for veterans is a threat, complete threat to the ecosystem around the government bureaucracy and the VA and the veterans groups. They exist to defend their territory. And they'll say, oh, it's for the betterment of the vets. Well, if vets are getting better treatment from non-conventional places, why aren't we exploring that? Well, the bureaucracy can't handle that. Well, it's not the existing system. It's not where most of the money comes from. It doesn't support the bricks and mortar facilities that they want to keep. The importance becomes keeping the facilities as opposed to what is the treatment that the vets are getting. So I had I know I had overwhelming support from veterans across the country who were who believed that Veterans Choice would unshackle them from driving 400 miles for a basic treatment when they could get it 10 miles from their house and the government pays for it. Or the idea that if you're abusing a vet, a VA official should be fired. So the solutions are simple. It's choice and accountability. Vets have choice, and people that aren't doing their job or doing it poorly get fired. But government doesn't do either of those things.
Yeah.
And so if you're going to do that, you better be ready to go to the mat in a way that's uglier than I think people can imagine. Everyone looks at the veteran space and says, can't we get along? Can't we all agree that we love vets? Of course. Well, if we're spending more, the VA has the budget of the VA is twice the size of the Marine Corps. The massive
Is it
budget.
really?
Yes, it's huge. It's the second largest federal department in the federal government. It's absolutely.
What's number one?
The DOD. So
Wow, I
it's
had no
DOD
idea.
and VA. And yet VA, you can't be seen in a timely manner and you're treated like a number. And the warm DC just hides behind the warm glow of all that. So I hope all these traditional veterans organizations watch this. They know.
What traditional veterans organizations?
I'm talking about the American Legion.
The VFW?
I'm talking about the VFW. I'm talking about AMVETS was good at one time, but AMVETS. I'm talking about Disabled American Veterans. I'm talking like Paralyzed Veterans of America.
All the pamphlets you see on the VA wall. That's what you're talking about.
It's the funny hats crowd.
Yeah.
Yes, and I respect them, their service, all of that. But they don't serve the interest of their members. It's just like the unions. Like when you go, why does Donald Trump have overwhelming support from union members, but yet the union bosses keep endorsing Joe Biden? It's because they don't actually reflect at some point in Washington, D.C., the interests of their members. They lose touch with the interests of their members because it becomes about perpetuation. And so I'm a member of the Legion in my hometown of Forest Lake, Minnesota, post 225. I signed up right after I got back from my first tour. But I don't have any affinity for it other than that. And I know that in Washington, D.C., they're not actually trying to fight for reform or real overhaul of the VA. They have a seat at the table and they like that seat.
Man, I didn't even realize those nonprofits were even relevant anymore. I thought that kind of died with the Vietnam generation. I joined too. I went in there and then I was like, I'm just drinking with a bunch of combat veterans kids
Vietnam vets,
who are wanting the free chicken wings and beer. And then I never went back.
But you're exactly right. They don't have any power except in Washington. In Washington, they still have a lot of power. You know why? Because they'll put out press releases. And press releases are like gold, little snowflakes in Washington. And they'll also have PACs, and they also give money. And they'll show up at press conferences behind you in uniform saying, we support it. And they love to be bipartisan because they don't want to be pigeonholed as one or the other.
Yeah.
And so they support everything that is just more money for the status quo.
Damn, that's sad. Do you think we'll ever see any? You think it'll ever improve over there?
Trump tried, and I think he will again. I really do. There was so much currency he had to spend in so many different places in a first term, and he got a lot done on the Mission Act, which is choice, and VA accountability. And he's got great people on the outside watching what Biden has done, and I think when they come back in, God willing, that there's a lot of overhaul to be had there.
If you're like me, health and wellness is extremely important to you. But how do you know who to trust when it comes to the supplement industry? We have all these companies, they pop up every other day, they're all recipe, and it helps support your joints, 10% solid golden in happiness orders. So if you're worried about your money losing value or you just maybe
And we just don't trust them.
No, I think you reflect. I don't know. Find me a vet who isn't in Washington, D.C.
Look at the oxy problem, the opiate problem. A lot of that was initiated by the VA.
All
there you go.
Handbags of pills.
Here's a
guys.
grocery sack full of drugs. Hope you feel better.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe he'll kill himself and then we can pull him off the books.
Or maybe he'll kill himself in the VA parking lot,
Yeah,
which has happened time and time again.
yeah.
Because that's what naively or basically you would expect. Well, I went to fight for my country. At the very least, they could take care of me when I come home. And then they meet a brick wall of numbers. They're just a number. Nobody gives a damn, and it's too much.
Yeah, that's even if you can get in.
Correct.
No, most people can't even get in. But all right, we've pounded the VA to a pulp here.
It's one of my favorite things to pound.
Yeah, me too. Me too. Everybody gets a gift on the show. You ready?
Okay.
It's my shameless.
I knew
plug.
this was coming.
You did.
Yeah, I did.
Are you a gummy
Seen
bear
it enough.
fan?
Absolutely. I would consider myself a gummy bear aficionado. Now, probably not as much as you, but I'm always looking for the softest, chewiest, best gummy bear.
Those are it. I wouldn't
These
eat
are it?
those. Don't eat them 30 minutes before you go on the air, though. I'm just
Okay.
kidding.
Are they those kind of gummy bears?
No, they're legal in all 50 states. They're good to go.
I'm going to try one right now. Well, they smell good. Yeah, I find that the generic ones are often the softest.
They're good. Let me know what you think.
Excellent.
Not bad, huh?
I didn't know you were in the gummy bear business.
I am. But well, let's move on to. I was going to save this to the end because this is what I'm most excited to talk about. But let's talk about the War on Warriors. Let's talk about the book. Where are you going with this?
Well, the idea of the book, I would say, I wrote a book about education. I've written some books about politics. And it just didn't feel like the right time to kind of assess where we were in the military, especially after 20 years of more or less ongoing combat. And, it takes a while for the dust to clear and to get a sense of like, hey, what happened? But then things, under Obama, but really after Trump and then in Biden, you start to look around and you say, wow. And it happened really fast. It happened slowly and then it happened fast. You start to realize this institution that I love, that I gave so many years to, that you gave so many years to, and I say that humbly because I did far less than so many. I did my one little thing that as part of a bigger effort over 20 years. But this institution is going sideways. It doesn't, and you hear time and time again.
Which institution?
The Department of Defense, the military, the Army, pick your service. And it started with a central question, the book. Would I recommend my kids join the Army today or the military today? And that used to be an open and shut case for me. It used to be absolutely hell yeah. Like, I want my kids to have the kind of ethos where they would. We've got a blended family of 5 boys. So that's a real question. Oldest is 14, youngest is 7. Like, they're not that far away from having the opportunity to make that decision. Would I recommend that? And it used to be, of course I would. And over the last couple of years, it became clear, like, would I? I don't know. And you talk to more and more guys, and they're having the same, they're either a hell no, or they're saying, yeah, for the first time in my life, I'm in the family business. It was my dad, my grandfather, they all served, and I'm second guessing whether I want my kids to. And so the book kind of helped me figure that out. And the last chapter of the book is a letter to my boys about whether I would want them to serve. But, and I can lay that out, but I didn't write that chapter until the end. So I wrote the whole book, and then I was like, okay, I want to look at the depth of what's happening to our warriors, because it's not, the book isn't just how the military went woke. There's plenty of those examples, and we feature them prominently on Fox, and you've seen them, and they're just the nonsense. The deeper question is, how did the military allow itself to go woke? How did our general class, how did our military academies, how did military leaders who are expected to live by an ethos and a code, they're in the job of meritocracy and lethality, of excellence, of no excuses, of equality and unity, not equity and diversity is ours. The dumbest phrase on planet Earth in the military is our diversity is our strength. It's our unity is what unites us, our unity of effort, our ability to say, yes, we're different, but we come together as a team to accomplish a mission. So I spent the better part of a year and a half talking to vets, and not just vets, but connecting through a network of a lot of guys I know. I host my show on Friday, Saturday, and Sunday in New York, so I've got Saturday afternoon wide open, and I spent for months my Saturday off the record anonymously with guys in service. So senior enlisted, junior enlisted, junior officers, senior officers, all branches, MOSs, eras, but mostly guys in right now, generals, privates, and all the same themes came out. Standards are dropping. The woke stuff is everywhere. I feel like I'm walking on eggshells. I heard that all the time. Eggshells. I'm a commander. I walk on eggshells. I train commanders. They're walking on eggshells. They're afraid of one misstep on one identification or one gender thing or one racial thing or one trans thing. And the priorities are upside down on what the units are focusing on. And every single one of those distractions means we're less good at our job, which is supposed to be close with and destroy the enemy on behalf of our nation and bring our boys home. That's all I care about. That's what I want our military focused on. And so, yeah, I tell a few of my own stories in the book, but the book's not about me at all.
How do you think that this is happening?
Well, it's a long story. So I think it's because they're ideologues who want to bring a meritocracy to heel. That's where I think it starts. I think you have politicians who don't want to tolerate an institution. First, they want to use it to tinker. And then they also don't want to tolerate an institution that's antithetical to their social experiments. Because the military, the book lays this out. Of course, like the integration of the military racially was a huge success. It was a huge success because black men and Hispanic men and others can perform just as well as white guys in any capacity that they're given. So the reality of life reinforced that the bigotry we saw on the outside should not be tolerated inside the military, and the military did a great job doing that. Pushing boundaries on lots of different levels that are different than that, because men and women are different, because being transgendered in the military causes complications and differences. And the book kind of lays out the common arguments that those on the left or others make, which are baked in social justice. So it started, you saw it under Clinton with the tinkering of Don't Ask, Don't Tell and the reasons for those changes. And I talked to some of the people involved in when that was changed. But it really started to accelerate under Obama. And you saw the trans stuff come at the end of the Obama administration. You saw the women in combat come at the end of the Obama administration. It's because they looked around at the bureaucracies that they controlled in Washington and the one that was that they didn't control. Obama spent a disproportionate amount of time focusing on the Pentagon. They were skeptical of leadership and eventually brought in political appointees and generals who would do their bidding the way they wanted, which, as you know, in a top-down organization changes the ethos of the whole thing. So the book is meant to pull the whole curtain back, mostly from Obama forward, and explain how the army that I enlisted in, or that I swore an oath in 2001 and was commissioned in 2003, looks a lot different than the army of today, because we're focused on a lot of
After
the wrong things.
1.2 miles, keep right.
I mean, you know this. You could talk about it all day, I bet.
We could. I'm trying to organize my thoughts here and figure out what
Me
rabbit
too.
holes to go down. But I mean, they've been wildly successful in morphing the military into this whatever you want to call it. And do you want to talk about? I don't want to forget about having your kids join the military.
Sure. Yep.
Maybe we end with that.
Sure.
Because I have a lot of thoughts on that too. But I mean, I don't know, man. I think about this all the time. I mean, you watch the show. I've had active duty guys on. I've had the most badass American warriors that we've ever produced on this show, and everybody says the same thing. They don't all say it on camera because it doesn't. We don't always
After
go into
half a
that.
mile, keep right.
But I do ask them, all of them, like, how is it in there? Especially the guys that just got out. They're all disgusted. They're all demoralized.
Totally.
I feel like
Keep right.
the gas really got turned on when the defund the police movement happened. I knew it was going to bleed in because I thought the defund the police, I was like, this isn't about this shit. They want to rid the LE agencies of the old guard because they all think alike.
Follow
They
A34
do a damn good
towards
job.
Southampton
And so
for
let's
29
destroy
miles.
it and rebuild it with a new mindset. And that happened. I think that happened. Do you think it happened?
Yes, I do. I mean, if you look at the back cover of the book, it says, I joined the Army to fight extremists in 2001. 20 years later, that same Army labeled me.
Yeah.
So I got out because, and I can tell the story or not, but I was deemed an extremist because of a tattoo by my National Guard unit in Washington, D.C. And my orders were revoked to guard the Biden inauguration. But all of this, so you have what happened with George
What a
Floyd.
punishment.
I know. It's actually, you put it that way, you're exactly right. You're exactly right. But you had the George Floyd riots, and then I was also in the DC Guard during what happened in front of the White House. You remember the insurrection that no one calls an insurrection outside the White House when they, burned the church down and got to the gates of the White House. I was there the second night through the fifth night of all of that. I was a 04 major holding a riot shield because they didn't have enough guys. So we were just out there doing our thing and explain a little bit about that. That happens, then January 6th happens. And both of those moments become pretenses for the DOD with political appointees who've long since been burrowed in and generals who are all in for the politically correct agenda. They maybe kept their head down during Trump because he didn't want to hear about it. Guys like Milley, guys like Austin, they were right there waiting in the wings, ready to go. And once the combination of Floyd and January 6th happened, they went all in on DEI and CRT and transformation, focusing on patriot extremism. That's what we talk all about that in the book. Gadsden flags are signs of radicalism. Get the bumper sticker off your car. A Jerusalem cross tattoo, which is just a Christian symbol.
Is that the
This is the one.
Is that the tattoo?
Yep, right here. This one is what got me disinvited, I'd never had orders revoked before. I mean, listen, it's a standard deal. You remember after January 6th, everyone was in Washington, D.C. Like Nancy Pelosi had the parking garages full of National Guardsmen.
Mm-hmm.
The fence was up. I was going, and my commander called me a day before, tepidly, and was like, Major, you can just stand down. We don't need you. We're good. I'm like, what do you mean? Everybody's there. He's like, no, he couldn't tell me. And then, of course, when I was writing the book, I reached out to somebody in the unit who could confirm with 99.9% certainty, because he was in the meetings and on the emails. Nope, someone inside the DC Guard trolled your social media, found a tattoo, used it as an excuse to call you a white nationalist, an extremist, and you were specifically by name orders revoked to guard the inauguration because you were considered a potential threat.
How was that? It's a cross.
It's a Christian symbol. That's all it is. There's a lot of guys, but I got a Christian symbol here. I got, about that. It was about, I don't know, was it I'm too conservative? Is it because I'm a Trump supporter? Is it because I was a reporter on January 6th?
So they just didn't want you there. So that was the...
Maybe I worked at Fox. Maybe that's what it was. They had decided Pete Hegseth is not qualified to guard the inauguration of a Democrat president, which is ridiculous because I volunteered to go to Afghanistan under Barack Obama. I'm no Democrat, but I was hopeful the surge in Afghanistan might work, and I volunteered to go in 2011, 2012. So it's never been about, for guys like you and me, it's never been about Republicans and Democrats. It's been about the Republic. And it's all been put into question in everyone's mind. And so there's a chance to course correct it, but it would take the new Trump administration going after it really hard.
How would they correct it?
Well, first of all, you got to fire. You got to fire the chairman of the Joint Chiefs, and you got to fire this. I mean, obviously, you're going to bring in a new Secretary of Defense, but any general that was involved, general, admiral, whatever that was involved in any of the DEI woke shit, has got to go. Either you're in for war fighting, and that's it, and that's the only litmus test we care about. You got to get DEI and CRT out of military academies, so you're not training young officers to be baptized in this type of thinking. And then, whatever the standards, whatever the combat standards were, say, in, I don't know, 1995, let's just make those standards. And as far as recruiting, to hire the guy that, did Top Gun Maverick and create some real ads that motivate people who want to serve. And there's lots of other ways in which you could identify who gets promoted and what, but there's an ethos change. I mean, there's a reason people don't want to serve, because they don't trust that their senior leaders are going to have their best interest in mind in combat. I know there were mistakes made on our tours all over the place, but I, at least for the most part, had a sense that my senior leaders were committed to the completion of the mission for the right reasons. And maybe there were strategic differences and all that other stuff, and it wasn't always perfect, but that trust is broken, and you have to reestablish that trust by putting in no-nonsense warfighters in those positions who aren't going to cater to the socially correct garbage.
I mean, you don't think we need to gut the entire institution? Do you think this is just coming from the top down?
I think right now my assessment based on talking to, is that it's a top-down, bottom-up problem. Is that you've got top-down political generals who've gained rank by playing by all the wrong rules that cater to the ideologues in Washington, D.C. And so they'll do any social justice, gender, climate, extremism crap because it gets them checked to the next level and gets them closer to the political appointees who don't know anything about the military really, other than they want a new first here and a new first there, and can we get the first trans this or whatever, just nonsense. And then now you have a junior corps, which, listen, their incentive structure, whether it was in university or at service academies or just coming through college, is belief in these things. That diversity is our strength, that equity, that the standards could be racially biased, that showing up on time is a social construct, that all these. So if you spend enough time with those two things meeting, you could have a wholesale takeover of the Defense Department. I do think there's still a core of mostly silent. They also pushed out a lot of vaccine folks because of the vaccine, obviously.
That's
another one.
I think that was
a purge.
Engineered as well.
That's a purge of people. That's a purge of people of conscience. If you have enough of a conscience, whether it's faith, belief, or whatever, purge out. Patriot extremism, purge out. So there was a big push of a lot of those people in the middle out. I still think, and I know enough guys and talked to enough who said, hey, I want to be in for the right reasons. I know what's wrong. It's jacked up. If I say something, I'm canned. But in a new environment, I think there's still a core there. That's not. And here's the challenge: in Battle for the American Mind, my other book was about the state of education in America, which is total. Government schools are, this as well as anybody, horror shows. But if you want to get out of them, you can. You can move. You can homeschool. You got options for the most part. School. We only have one Defense Department. What's the option? Abandon it? And so if every patriot abandons it, what does it look like, and how is it utilized in the future in ways that are far more nefarious than foreign wars, where we get entangled and we end up trying to nation build for 20 years?
I feel like that's how we fix it. You abandon it.
Really?
Yep. I know you probably think I'm crazy.
I would.
We have a Second Amendment. We have more gun owners than anything else in this country. Yeah, I know we need planes and tech and satellites and Space Force and all the Navy and all the shit, but when's the last time we actually went to war to fight for our freedom?
We won't even defend our southern border.
Should we have been in Iraq?
I was a huge proponent of it at the time, but in retrospect, absolutely not.
So was I. I don't think we should have been there.
Yeah.
I think that was all for Cheney and KBR, Halliburton. I think we were in Afghanistan for way too. I don't even think we're defending the country. Like, why the fuck are people even signing up to go to war for what? For what? Whose war? It's not our fucking war. We're funding the Taliban $40 to $87 million
a week.
A week. A week. They run the government over there. They're making passports for these guys, legitimate passports for these guys. They fly them all over South America and Central America. They funnel up through the southern border. It's not a fucking conspiracy. It's real. And so what are we going to use our military for? For Ukraine?
No.
So why would anybody sign up? What are you defending? What are you defending?
It's a great question. I think and that's why I reserved judgment to say I want to know what the world looks like in 4 years when you're 18.
And if we do, if they do lose all the patriots, they have to change something. because they have
Or
no
do
one.
they? Or do they? Or
Maybe
would
you're
they?
right.
Or
Maybe
would they
you're right.
conscript?
Maybe you're right.
Or would they bring in pathway to citizenship conscript? I mean, I think DC will find a way, and it may be ugly, and so I share all of your skepticisms about that. I've been a recovering neocon for 6 years now. Like the foolishness with which we ricocheted around the world, intervening, think it was in our best interest, when really we just overturned the table and created something worse in almost every single scenario, has led to the hubris of the Pentagon is that they want to now tell other countries how to do counterinsurgency based on what we did in Iraq and Afghanistan. Like, are you kidding me? So you really have learned nothing. Okay, nothing. So you're right. The trust there that our political leaders or our generals would have our best interests in mind is totally broken. It's totally broken. I acknowledge that completely. And the last thing I want is my son deploying to the Donbass to defend Eastern Ukraine. I'm with you too. At the same time, I'm fearful of what happens when the institution gets abandoned completely. And maybe it feels like the public school argument, like, hey, if we take all the Christians and people of faith out of public schools, then they're really going to go, yeah, but you got to save your kid, right? And I'm going to save my kid. And that's the view. It's just, there isn't an alternative right now to the United States military. Mm-hmm. There just isn't. And I don't want to lose patriotic influence over that. So my prayer, because if Donald Trump doesn't win and Kamala Harris is the commander in chief, what's happening inside our military is going to go on another level of warp speed. Mm-hmm. And you're going to see even more guys and gals retiring, and even more of the DEI woke focus, and it's going to continue to spiral. If Trump does win and goes at it, I think it might be our last sort of chance to save this institution and turn it back to what it was, because it is a top-down organization. You put a SecDef in there who's focused on all the right things, get rid of all the things that are described in the book, and focus on not equity but equality. Mm-hmm. You can do it. There's still the core there, but I share all your. I mean, what has Washington shown us in the last 20 years that we should trust them with how they'll use our young men? It's fair. I mean, Trump tried to use them on the border and they shut him down.
Our power grid's fucked. Our border's fucked. Our education system's fucked. Everything's fucked. That's the way it feels. Everything is fucked, and we're shipping all of our money overseas. We should be. I mean, do you know anything about the power grid? Do you know how bad it is?
Super vulnerable. I mean, one EMP, one of the right strikes, and we're. What happens when we're months without power?
I don't think they even need to do an EMP. We don't need. China produces all of our transformers, all of our solar, all of our wind, everything. And we don't even check it for malware or Trojan horses or any of these type of viruses that and even FBI Director Ray came out and said, yeah, they're in our grid and they're in our water treatment plants. And all they have to do is flip the switch. But we shipped 175 million thus far to Ukraine. But
no, well, and Bin Laden's son is now in Afghanistan, and he's married to the daughter of Mullah Omar and the daughter of Zarqawi, and they're. I mean, when the FBI director is saying that the dashboard is flashing red and smoking, he's not doing it because he's doing it because he's covering his ass. He knows something's coming at some point, and
But even on top of all the DEI stuff on the military, I don't even think I think that's just one aspect of the war on warriors. I mean, just before we started talking on the show, we were having a side conversation about the Biden Four, the Blackwater guys, Eddie Gallagher, Goldstein. The latest one, I don't know if you're aware of this, Brad Geary. Do you know who Brad Geary is? Mm-mm. He's a naval captain. He was in charge of Naval Special Warfare Training Center. He was the guy that was in charge when Mullen, the SEAL recruit, who was in Bud's died.
Yep.
And now they're pinning his ass to the wall, and it's straight lies. Just for an example, they are blaming it on the training cadre, and it was too hard, and the medical checks were wrong, and da-da-da-da-da. But they did three separate investigations to cover up. They just kept reinvestigating it until the facts were gone. And the facts were that they found a cooler or some type of a box full of vials of testosterone, human growth hormone, and Viagra, from Pakistan. And when he died, his heart was 63% larger than most. I think he was 23. Was he 23 at the time? But they had all of that removed out of the investigation. I should connect you guys.
Absolutely.
But that's the latest one. That's Eddie Gallagher. They tried him for murdering an ISIS fighter.
Yep.
They tried him for murdering an ISIS fighter.
Correct.
And I was a SEAL, and I asked because I thought he was guilty. Because everybody was saying that he was guilty. I was calling my buddies that were still in, hey, what's up with this Gallagher guy? Is this real? Like, what? I don't see the problem here. And they're like, oh man, dude, you don't want to. It's bad. They have the videos. It was bad. They told, I think it was Green, went around to all the SEAL teams and briefed them saying that they had video, the proof that Eddie killed this guy in a, I don't know, whatever fashion. But nobody ever saw it. Turns out in court it never came up. They just fucking lied to the entire SEAL community to pin this guy's ass to the wall. A lot of people still hate him.
You had his lawyer, Tim Parlatore,
Yeah.
on your show, without the kind of legal defense that he got. I mean, they got the other guy to admit that he killed him in the last day of trial.
Yeah, it wasn't even him.
It wasn't even him. So
You didn't even kill the ISIS fighter.
So it's Eddie Gallagher or Clint Lawrence or the Raven 23 guys who
And those
had on the
guys
show.
Nick Slatton was going to prison for life.
For life.
And the other three, I believe it was 35 years. And they deleted the drone footage that proved their innocence in court. That's another one. Hey, let's just retry them until we get a guilty
A couple of them didn't even pull the trigger in the actual incident. It's Matt Goldstein's the other one I'm thinking of, a Green Beret. So yeah, I mean, chapter 10 and 11 are more lethality, less lawyers, and the laws of war for winners. Talking about exactly this. And this is why, I was proud to be a part of, in a small way, behind the scenes, with all of those, with the pardons that came from President Trump. And what his instinct was, hey, I'm with the warfighters. Like, we sent them to do these really dangerous, dirty, difficult things that no one else would do. And then sort of like the line from A Few Good Men. And then we challenge the manner in which they do it. And even when they do it in a way we may not like or every people don't understand, rather than giving them deference or having their back or finding a way to support them, we throw them under the bus. And the Raven 23 is one of the most egregious examples of that, because it was politically expedient for Hillary Clinton and Joe Biden to do that. It was a gift to the Maliki government because of what, the publicity that had come out because of it. And so you have a Pentagon that starts to be complicit with that way of thinking, and it's all about advancement and covering up problems, and they don't have the backs of guys. Rules of engagement are a huge problem, as you know.
That's another one.
It's a big one.
I mean, I remember I was working for the agency at the time, and we were in Helmand Province, and the Marines were getting ready to do this big push through Marja. Do you remember that?
I remember that, yep.
We were co-located, right? They didn't know, but we were right alongside them. And I remember when the ROEs came out for that under the Obama administration, it was, if they shoot at you and drop their weapon, you cannot return fire.
In a war.
And I was like, man, like, you just cut these guys' legs out right out from under them. Like, nobody's even, what are we doing? Like, you just put the fear of God in these guys that if they have to do their job and defend the country, that they're going to go to prison for the rest of their life. I mean, they demoralized the entire battalion that was doing that offensive push. And I mean, it's just this has been a long process.
That's why I say the rules of war for winners, because why are we fighting an enemy? Why have we spent the last 20 years fighting enemies that don't abide by rules at all? And these are rules written by, like, dudes in cloakrooms in Europe after World War I because they thought that they could fight polite wars in the future amongst European nations. When we live now in a world in 2024 where all of our enemies use all of their advantages against us, ignoring all the rules of war, and then expecting us to play by all those very same rules, where we're our largest critiquers in the middle of the process, and then we wonder why the war never ends and why it perpetuates itself, and then why we're throwing our own guys in jail. Because we've written rules that are impossible, that are written for us to lose, that are written for our guys to be in handcuffs. I mean, I got a similar brief. We had a JAG officer, brief our platoon in Iraq in 2005 in Baghdad prior to one of our first missions, and it was just standard ROE briefing. He's like, so you see a man in the road and he's carrying an RPG. It's not yet pointed at you. And it was, an enemy. Can you shoot? My guy's like, hell yeah. Like, no, you cannot. But you cannot shoot until he's pointing that weapon at you. And I just remember walking out, and clear as day, I remember walking out of that briefing, pulling my platoon together and being like, guys, we're not doing that. Like if you see an enemy and they're engaged before he's able to point his weapon at you and shoot, we're going to have your back. And that comes back down to commanders. And I felt like I could say that because I knew I had commanders echelons above me who would have our backs in that process. And the New York Times and the left and Democrats would say, all they do is take one incident and yell war criminal. They never actually understand the context of what happened. I mean, I got the same income on Eddie Gallagher. Don't touch this story. I talked to CLF, don't touch it. Guilty is all hell. Guilty is all. And I just looked more and more. Same with Clinton Rentz. Same with Matt Goldstein. And the Raven 23 guys.
What is Matt Goldstein?
Matt Goldstein's Green Beret. I can't remember all the particulars of it right now, but he was involved. A guy who they had rolled up, who had been involved in killing Americans, then had gotten released, and his sources were going to be killed, and he laid in basically an ambush on the guy when he was released and killed him because they knew that their sources were all going to be killed. Forgive me if that's wrong, something along those lines. He's probably going to watch and text me and be like, you're an idiot. So I'm sure I got some part of that wrong. He's one of the smartest, most patriotic guys you'll ever meet. I mean, you should have him on the show sometime. Guy's phenomenal, like stupid level smart, PhD level.
Did he get out of it, or is he?
He got out of it. He got a pardon.
He did?
From Trump.
Nice.
And because the thing with Trump is, if his wife Julie Goldstein was on our show a number of times. She's just really articulate, really passionate. Once he sees a story and gets how it connects to something bigger, connects to the bigger idea that we're fucking over our warfighters here. Mm-hmm. Why are we doing that? Why did we do that? Why wouldn't we back these guys up, even if they weren't perfect? And he'd call me like, they did some nasty, did some tough things. These are rough guys, but he respects people that were willing to do it on behalf of the rest of us, and he's not going to throw them under the bus. So once he gets the information, and you're able to say, here's what happened, or here's what happened in Eddie Gallagher's trial. I mean, that went all the way to the Secretary of the Navy, if you remember that. Yeah. I mean, the guy Spencer got canned for misrepresenting how that entire case went out. That's what you need, leaders that get it, and that was Donald.
For whoever gets into office to put like a team together of these guys that have been through what we're talking about, like Eddie, Brad Geary, Goldstein.
Yep.
Because one, they know who to go after because it's happening to them. Mm-hmm. Two, they're passionate about
Put Tim Parlatoria on that list too, by the way. He's super smart.
Yeah, Tim would be.
It'd be good.
Tim would be a great wrecking ball.
He would.
A level-headed wrecking ball. But I feel like maybe a little bit of an overcorrection because, it's personal, but
sure.
I mean, I feel like that would be a great start.
Yeah, you have to start with people who can say, okay, I know who the political animals were in those places.
Yeah.
Because that's the challenge of a new administration. So everyone's going to jump up and down and say, I was this, or I was never really for that, or I was... Because they want to preserve their careers, and you have to have somebody that's able to call balls and strikes.
I mean, this isn't just happening with the military, though. I mean, this is in all the agencies. I know it's at the agency because I was there. It was bad when I left in 2015. But, when you say from the top down, I don't know if that works. I don't know about the academies, what they're teaching.
Well, you'd have to change the academies too, right? So that's where you have to change both